You've got to make it as easy as possible for kids and families to play. And the way to do that is to embed play opportunities in places that they already are spending time.
Hi, welcome to Fit Kids Conversations. I'm your host, David Jacobson, and today I'm here with James Siegal, Senior Fellow at KABOOM and a board member of the National Fitness Foundation. We're here to talk all matters youth fitness, health, wellness, mental well-being. James, thanks for joining me today.
It's great to be with you, David.
Terrific. So can you start off by telling us a little bit about your role with KABOOM and maybe a little bit of the history that led to your being there and how that intersects with National Fitness Foundation in terms of your overall effort to address play-space inequity and get kids moving?
So KABOOM, it's a national nonprofit organization. We build playgrounds and other play spaces in communities all across the U.S. that have experienced significant disinvestment. And in the U.S. context, what that typically means is communities that have been borne the brunt of racial segregation and racialized disinvestment. And our role is to ensure that every kid, regardless of zip code, grows up in a community where they have abundant opportunities to play with play spaces where they live, where they go to school and learn, and just out and about in the community. And we've been doing that since the mid-90s, have built well over 3,000 playgrounds directly and have had a hand in thousands and thousands more. And we're really focused these days on trying to eliminate play space inequity completely in the US. We think it's a solvable problem. We are working closely in a number of places around the country through our 25 and 5 initiative, where our goal is to eliminate play space inequity in over 5 years in 25 places, which means that, for example, in the city of Baltimore, making sure that every kid going to school in Baltimore has a great place to play where they learn. We work with school districts, park districts, other municipal systems and the like to make sure that every kid has that great opportunity to play.
That's awesome. I can't imagine anything more important than that. I imagine that the backdrop we're looking at here is something that KABOOM built. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is in Heron's Head, Bayview, Hunters Point, San Francisco. And if you're familiar with San Francisco, Bayview, Hunters Point has had a history of huge concentration of poverty, significant Black and brown population, and a lot of environmental degradation because of the shipyards there. And so what you see behind me came together as a terrific partnership with San Francisco Rec and Parks under the amazing leadership of Phil Ginsburg, and with other partners, including Children in Nature Network, which makes sure that kids get connected to nature as a positive in their childhood development, and also a mission-oriented business, Bean and Stock Natural Playgrounds, which builds these amazing natural play spaces. And the one behind me is made out of exclusively wood that was reclaimed from San Francisco. And so it's a regenerative space that addresses environmental degradation there, but it's also just an absolutely amazing play space that connects kids with nature and gives them all the various benefits of play, whether that's physical benefits from movement or, like you said earlier, mental health benefits from being outside and engaging with each other and with trusted adults in their lives, and brings the community together to increase social cohesion and bring people together across difference.
So talk a little bit about yourself as kind of a mission-driven person, how long you've been working with KABOOM and what led you there. I mean, you were an attorney at one point, and then you joined the bright side.
Yeah, a corporate lawyer, no less, doing public offerings and mergers and acquisitions and the like. And when I was a lawyer, I spent a lot of time doing pro bono work for nonprofit organizations. And through that, I just really caught the bug of how nonprofits look to make change happen in the world. And after spending a couple of years at a large law firm in private practice, I moved into state government in New York State at the Attorney General's office, where my role was to regulate charitable activity in New York. And I got this broad purview of the nonprofit sector, and just continued to love how nonprofits made change happen in the world. From there, I transitioned to independent sector, which is the coalition of nonprofits, foundations, corporate giving programs. And independent sector represents the interests of the nonprofit community with the White House, with the administration, with Capitol Hill, and also pushes best practices. And I was really focused on ensuring that the nonprofit community embraced the best when it came to leadership development and measurement and evaluation practices and ethics and accountability practices and the like. And from there, I swung back into the federal government, where I was chief of staff at the Corporation for National Community Service, which runs AmeriCorps. And again, saw how through a partnership of the public sector and nonprofits, great change would happen when you mobilized human capital against the biggest problems that our country faces. And all of these roles, I had this broad purview of the sector. But at the same time, I got to know this great organization called KABOOM. And it was about the same time when I became a dad. And I just loved the elegantly simple mission of the organization to enable kids to have a joyful childhood. And that really spoke to me as someone not only who was steeped in nonprofit work and could see that it was a really effective and well-run organization, but as a parent who was making sure that through the work I did and hoping through my parenting to give a joyful childhood to kids that I love. And so I actually volunteered, and I built 3 playgrounds as a volunteer with KABOOM before joining essentially as the number 2 to our founder, Daryl Hammond, who had this amazing vision and had grown this organization by leaps and bounds before I even got there. And I've been with KABOOM both in that number 2 role, then as CEO for 5 years, and now in the senior fellow role over that whole course for 11 years with the organization. And I just love the organization. I love what we do. I have terrific colleagues, and I'm just, very grateful and fortunate for that opportunity to make a difference that way.
People can join you in their support of KABOOM, obviously, but also just generally join in the effort to get kids moving, to address place space inequity through any number of organizations or initiatives. Can you talk about how you would envision those public-private partnerships? And when I say public, I'm including the general public as well, in terms of how they either influence policy or just decide where to put their own energy into different nonprofits and other initiatives.
First of all, I like to look at which systems are not living up to their potential to figure out where to try to make the most difference. And when you look at challenges at the system level, it requires multiple institutions from multiple sectors coming together to solve big problems. And when you look at places to play, most of that happens at the local level, right? You think about park systems and school districts, public housing, affordable housing, and the like. And those systems have had a history of exclusion and disinvestment. And so in the US, many people are familiar with the story of segregation of schools and the Brown v. Board of Education decision that desegregated schools, and the white flight that followed, and the decades of disinvestment that followed. There's a parallel story when it comes to places to play. And in fact, there were federal court cases around the same time as Brown v. Board of Education that were challenging segregation in parks and swimming pools and the like. And what that's left is a very inequitable situation when it comes to access to places to play, where if you're in a well-off community, every school has a great place to play. There are parks everywhere. Out in the community, there are just ample opportunities for families to have fun and to connect with other people. And in places that have experienced disinvestment, there's not. And so like in Philadelphia, 2/3 of elementary schools don't have a playground. Could you imagine like elementary school kids at their school not having a place to play? It just like boggles the mind. But the reality is that that is the state of affairs in many school districts across this country. And so when I think about it, like, how do you engage? You got to find the ways to engage that can actually have the potential to fix the problem at the scale the problem exists. And that's why at KABOOM, we work closely with school districts and park systems and public housing and the like, because there are incredibly well-intentioned leadership in those places across the country who are trying to fix historic wrongs, but don't have the resources or the capacity to do it alone. And so we as a nonprofit organization can bring more resources to the table by attracting philanthropy and corporate giving and the like. We can access federal resources to bolster what we can do. And we can engage community in the effort. And so when we build playgrounds, it's like almost like a modern day barn raising, but for kids, right? And so instead of building a house, we're building a playground. And it's just magical what happens when people come together and have that collective sense of ownership to create a sense of belonging in community and roll up their sleeves next to each other and actually do the work to make sure places like what's behind me come to life for the kids in their community. And it breaks down differences across people because, you know, we may not agree on a lot these days, but one thing we can agree on is that every kid deserves a happy childhood. And so there are so many different ways to engage. I think it's important to find those tangible ways, like building a playground and connecting it to the systemic change that's needed to make sure that it benefits every kid who does not have that access.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. In terms of the typical scenario for the concerned busy parent, whether they're in an under-resourced community or otherwise, what are some specific pressure points, be that school board, PTA, district level, or local government or beyond? What have you seen be most effective in terms of what that busy parent can do to move the needle?
Well, it's a really important question. And about 7 or 8 years ago, we did some research with a behavioral science firm, Ideas 42, which is this great nonprofit hub for behavioral science research. And they use that behavioral science to address societal challenges. And we asked them like how we can get kids to play more, because, you know, we've all seen communities where there may be spaces available, but no one's out there, right? And one of the things that they pointed out to us was that there are all these hassle factors, little ones that add up to make it too easy for parents to say, sorry, now's not the time to play. So if you think about the need to get to the local playground at a park, if you happen to have one, as a parent or caregiver, you're going through this list in your mind, probably even like subconsciously, like, okay, what's the weather like outside? Is there a safe route to get there? When we get there, is there a bathroom in case my kid has an emergency? What other things do I have on my to-do list, like doing laundry and cooking dinner and so forth? And all those little hassle factors add up. And it's like, no, we can't go play now. And so when we were presented with that, we then asked Ideas 42, okay, well, if that's the challenge, how do you overcome that? And they said something that was like obvious after the fact, right? You've got to make it as easy as possible for kids and families to play. And the way to do that is to embed play opportunities in places that they already are spending time. And it's often time that's filled with frustrating moments. So instead of like having to keep your kids from running out into the street when you're waiting for the bus, how about a mini playground at the bus stop?
Interesting.
Or if you're struggling to get your kid to walk to school, which we know is so healthy for everyone, um, can you make it a playful route instead of a boring one, and certainly not an unsafe one? Um, at the laundromat, can you have places to play? And so since that time, in addition to building playgrounds that are community hubs, we also have been doing what we call play everywhere, which is trying to build play and the opportunities to play into the everyday environment for kids. And the combination of the two is so critical. And then you overcome those barriers. And by the way, you also can address safety issues that way, because we know communities that are active with a lot of people out and about are much safer. It's eyes on the street. We know that streets that are walked often are more likely to be safe for pedestrians, because other traffic, cars and so forth, are used to people in that space. And you create then policy and momentum for municipalities to say, hey, we need to improve these crosswalks, or we need to make sure that there's good sight lines of visibility to places where families are congregating. And so all those can add up, but it starts from that kernel of like, our job is to make it as easy as possible for parents and other caregivers to get their kids to play. And then the last thing I'll say on it is, we know that play brings joy. So let's lift that up. Like, we shouldn't be talking about like, how do we get kids to exercise more? It's like, how do we get kids to have more fun? And if we focus on the fun and the joy, it's also going to reduce those mental blocks that keep kids and their families from playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that VidKids agrees wholeheartedly with, in terms of, have the students we serve work out without even realizing they're working out. Make it fun. Don't tell them that they're quote unquote eating their vegetables, What also really struck me about what you were saying is that the end goal being more play and more movement, and therefore more fitness, more joy, it starts with direct action in terms of actually getting out and doing the play, and then trying to exert on a policy level or calling to attention government's responsibility to see to these the ability for these activities to occur that are demonstrated by public will as needing to occur. Do I have that right? It's kind of like get out there and play first and then make noise about having a place to play.
I think it's like a virtuous cycle. And so it doesn't really matter where you start on the cycle, but both are necessary. And so you think about what we all went through in the first years of the pandemic, where all of a sudden social connection is disrupted. And for public health reasons, we're limiting our contact with other people. And all of a sudden, people started valuing public space more.
Sure.
And so, and then as a result, people start getting out more. They're not in their cars as much. They're not commuting to an office. They're out in their communities more outside, because outside is safer than being indoors. And then all of a sudden you see pressure on municipalities to spend money on creating better outdoor space. And then once you have better outdoor space, it attracts more people to that space. And it's that virtuous cycle. And we've seen it. So, public surveys have suggested that, more people are valuing outdoor time and public space. And we've seen huge investment through things like the American Recovery Act money, where it's going to places like parks. And so that is a terrific virtuous cycle. And from a policy perspective, the hope is that that doesn't end when the crisis is over, right? But that's built the public will to continue demand from government that we invest in places that are good for kids and good for families.
So as a board member of National Fitness Foundation, I mean, obviously it's not a policy role, but you are adjacent to policymakers and you have an ear at the federal government. Can you talk about what the efforts are there and how they dovetail with your KABOOM efforts and your personal philosophy?
It's such an interesting organization because it's the independent 501c3 that's dedicated to supporting the work of the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition. And it's federally chartered to do that. So it's like this weird independent nonprofit, but connected to government. And it's got this incredible platform to excite and mobilize people around healthy and active lifestyles. And we've got, with the President's Council, just amazing co-chairs in Elena Delle Donne and Jose Andres, amazing council members like Ayesha and Steph Curry and Chloe Kim and Tamika Catchings and the like, and folks who are just so committed to doing what's best for kids and making sure that we were doing whatever is possible so that kids lead healthy lifestyles. And that involves everything from being active to getting the right nutrition to focusing on mental health and well-being to getting the right sleep. It's a whole child approach to that well-being. And on top of that, making sure we're doing it in a way that addresses equity issues, because we know that certain communities have been put at a disadvantage when it comes to being able to live healthy lifestyles. And then it's got this history that's completely bipartisan. So the key program historically that the National Fitness Foundation adopted was the Presidential Youth Fitness Program, which started way back with President Eisenhower and has been embraced by many presidents since then. And I think all of us have that memory from our, growing up in school of doing the fitness test, right? And this goes back to our earlier conversation. One of the things that we're doing now is we need to make sure that it's just not another way to test our kids. Kids are tested on absolutely everything. We need to bring the joy. And how do we get kids excited about being fit? How do we get kids excited about being active? How do we get kids excited about healthy nutrition? How do we get kids excited about focusing on their own mental well-being through mindfulness and things like that? And so right now with the National Fitness Foundation, we're exploring ways to build on this incredible legacy that goes back to the Eisenhower days, but do it in a way that really mobilizes more people to be active and get engaged, and to do it in a way that creates strong bonds across people who get involved. So we're starting to do that now. It's, in some ways, a rebirth of the National Fitness Foundation. And I'm excited to see where we take it because there's so much potential, right? You think about things that are coming up that are going to shine a huge spotlight on physical activity. You got the Olympics, you've got the World Cup. And are those things going to motivate people to get their kids playing, or is it just going to be entertainment that you do passively? And so we can't squander this moment. We have to bring the fun back, the joy back to getting kids active. And I'm hopeful that the National Fitness Foundation can play a role in doing that with the great partners we have at the President's Council and others who want to get involved in making sure that our nation as a whole is prioritizing the health and well-being of our kids.
You're bringing back memories of the desire for that embroidered patch that I never did earn from the President's Council back in the 70s. I think it was the pull-ups that got to me the worst. And hopefully I can do better than that this time around, although I don't know if they've got a master's division for that for that honor.
Something to think about.
Yeah, get us old guys involved too. Well, this is beautiful what the National Fitness Foundation is doing as well. And are there any specific acts that people can take to get involved there?
Well, stay tuned. We'll likely be doing something big in the coming summer, and so not yet ready to announce the full details of that, but good things coming. And we're going to have a lot of ways to engage. And if people want to stay on top of things, they can go to the National Fitness Foundation website, which is just fitness.foundation, to stay up to date on things and find out more as we unroll what the plan is for the coming year.
Fitness.foundation. All right.
Yep.
We'll be there early and often. James, as we have just a couple minutes left, is there anything more you'd like to say in conclusion?
The only thing I'll say is that I've really seen over the last 11 years working closely at KABOOM with communities all over the country that play is so critical to solving our most pressing challenges that we face. And I'll just give two very quick examples of that. We've been working deeply in Uvalde, Texas, following the tragedy there at Robb Elementary School. We've built 5 play spaces in the year that's followed, and we're on track to build about 7 more, which will ensure that every kid growing up in Uvalde has a great place to play. And when you think about the trauma of kids growing up in an environment like that, how necessary it is to ensure that they have the ability to really take care of themselves and find those moments of joy amidst the tragedy. And we see that need in communities across the country, maybe not maybe not in situations as front page news all the time as Uvalde, but kids are growing up in trauma across the country, and we need to provide those moments of joy and those moments of release for them. And the second is, like the space behind me, play has a critical role to play in addressing the climate challenge that we face as a global community. And we are working to ensure that the playgrounds that we build are an asset for our climate, and not an extractor. And you think about public play spaces, they have the potential to be the very best of environmental resilience, creating play spaces that are using materials that can be regenerative, that have the ability to help with things like reducing heat islands, improving air quality, improving stormwater management. And it's an industry that I think is ready to embrace that challenge. And so I'm excited to see going forward how we see play as a society, not as a nice to have, but as something critically important to childhood development, to addressing trauma, to environmental resilience, and all these major challenges we face as a society. Because if we can do that, we can engage people in positive ways about something that brings them joy, rather than just frighten them with the possibility of the alternative. And imagine a generation of kids who are motivated to continue to improve the climate, not based on the existential threat alone, but also because of their great love of being connected to nature. That's a optimistic view of what's possible if we all embrace that.
That's so very well said, and we appreciate the optimism. It doesn't really pay to be any other way than optimistic has been our experience. Thank you so much, James, for taking the time with us, sharing the wisdom, inspiration, background, and specific actions that people can take to achieve all that we're talking about, both at Fit Kids and KABOOM and National Fitness Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, David, and just love the work that you do, and just happy to be in conversation with you.